What's up, Penn State fans? It's BWI Live. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickle. It's Wednesday, April 8th. We are in the 2 p.m. time slot. Appreciate you all being here with us as you guys filter in. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn on those notifications. We'll remind you a few more times about that as the show unfolds. T. Frank, Penn State is entering the second half of football spring practice. We're going to get into that. Some big recruiting news as the recruiting spring period rolls on as before the coaches hit the road later this month. We're going to talk a little bit of basketball. Even though Nate's not with us, we will talk a little bit about the transfer portal news that came out this morning. Get into some best bets later in the show. But T. Frank, it's April 8th. Penn State had practice number 7 yesterday, practice number 8 tomorrow at the Lash Building, of course, in the morning and inside Haluba Hall potentially. How we doing? How we feeling about Penn State spring practice at the midway mark of drills?
But it always blows my mind when we get to a point like, here's the midway point, and I just, like, we just started doing this. When you have 15 practices and, like, you know, you do the math, it's not very long before we're into the third week, and now we're counting down to the blue-white weekend, you know? So, excited. I am excited to go to practice tomorrow. I'm trying not to say a thing, but it's like I'm preempting the negative Nellies in my head of, like, yes, you can learn stuff from open practice. We will be able to learn some things, and, you know, not to take too much away from that, but there are context clues. There are things that we can learn from tomorrow, and I'm excited to do it. Like, it's just one of those situations where it's in my head that people are going to say that, and it's just like you're already raining on my parade. Like, don't rain on my parade. I'm going to really enjoy this. So I'm pre-hyped for tomorrow.
Well, it'll be here before we know it, and a recruit will be here before we know it on Thursday for a visit. But before that, let's talk about today's visitor. Peter Bourque is on campus, one of the top targets for Penn State at quarterback in the class of 2027. The Massachusetts four-star former Michigan commit sits at number 6 in the Rivals industry ranking, quarterback rankings. You can check out a lot more about where Penn State is at this point of the cycle in the quarterback recruiting realm. Sean Fitch just posted a QB mini board. A lot of information broken down into tiers. You can get a sense where Peter Bourque is on that list, where the rest of Penn State's quarterback targets are on this list. T. Frank, let me put you on the spot. From what you've seen so far, and we're going to talk more about Peter Bourque in a segment a little bit later, breaking down your film evals of some recent commits and also some new targets. But in your just overall observation of how this staff recruits quarterbacks in the 121 days that they've been here now, with yesterday being the 120-day 4-month mark. What are your initial impressions of what they're looking for and how you see them trying to continue to obviously stock a room that is right now led by Rocco Beck, someone that's been with them a long time, but before long is going to be turning over to obviously the guys that are here now and any that come with them in the class of 2027?
Yeah, so I like their quarterback recruiting. And to be clear, like, I liked the quarterbacks that Penn State was collecting over the last couple of years under James Franklin. I don't think that we got a chance to see all of that kind of play out. And obviously, they did not have the offense to take advantage of some of the skills and traits that I think they had. You know, like, I was a fan of Ethan Grunkmeyer and some of the things that he was able to do from the neck up. Like, that's, to me, the thing. They're looking for decisive, aggressive quarterbacks that are willing to throw the ball into the correct window on the correct read and aren't afraid to throw the ball down the field into tight windows or into matchups, right, where they want the ball to go, but not be reckless with it, right? So read the play, but the offense by nature is going to lead you to being and feeling like an aggressive quarterback, but it's the decision-making power of the quarterback and the efficiency of what they do. The package, clearly by who they're going after, they want the complete package, but that is not as important as that first part. So we've seen 6'1" quarterbacks. Rocco Becht is not a big guy. Brock Purdy, not a big guy, although he is built for his size. So Alex Mansky, 6'3". They'll come in all different shapes and sizes. Case Evans is a guy that I think can grow into kind of that size of an Alex Mansky. So they want to have the whole thing. Right. They want to have the athleticism as well, because running is a huge part of what they want in this offense as well when they need it on a third down or in certain situations. Again, aggressiveness is a part of this offense, and using your quarterback on a third down sneak is an aggressive decision by the offensive coordinator. And so all those things factor in, and they're all important. But the most important thing is, I think, the gut check ability of the quarterback to throw the ball with the right read, irrespective of the situation. Like, don't care about the stakes. Throw the ball where you're supposed to throw the ball and make big plays. And I think that is what you see in a lot of the guys that they're recruiting.
Like we said, you will find out more later today, as will all of us, about what Peter Bourque's visit is like by visiting bluewhiteillustrated.com. Running a 50% off spring sale right now. You can get the Ultimate Fan Bundle, the insight from the guys at Rivals on 3, and of course all of us at bluewhiteillustrated.com. 50% off bluewhiteillustrated.com. Again, Sean Fitz has a very in-depth QB mini board up right now that gives you all of the lay of the land of what's going on with Jake Waters' quarterback room and Taylor Mauser's offense and how they're searching to find the next quarterback or quarterbacks at Penn State in the class of 2027. Speaking of that, somebody who any new Penn State quarterback could possibly throw to one day, top Penn State target receiver Matthew Gregory, the 4-star out of Pottstown, top 100 in the Rivals industry ranking, put on social media earlier today that he is going to be on campus at Penn State tomorrow. Obviously, the Nittany Lions will be on the practice field for practice 8, as we mentioned earlier. Great player to watch, T. Frank, a guy that I think most fans are familiar with at this point in time, somebody that's been a target for Penn State for quite a while, and to get him on campus this Thursday, certainly a good sign for Penn State.
Yeah, and again, fits what they're looking for in a certain sense. It's interesting. This is going to be something that I find very interesting when it comes to the way they recruit in this ecosystem that they're in now, because previously, I don't want to say it's been they've had the pick of the litter in the Midwest when it comes to receiver prospects of their prototypes, but they have very much been able to find 6'4" wide receivers to put at X,
right?
As the game breaking big down the field shot play. So when we're talking about the quarterbacks and those aggressive reads, you need to give those guys the best possible chance to catch the football, and so they want big receivers with a big catch radius and great leaping ability to go get those one-on-one battles down the field. Gregory is 6 foot, not necessarily in the size perspective, but in terms of his speed and his downfield receiving ability, explosive athlete. That's why he was ranked so high initially, 33 overall by ESPN, which has him still, in the top 100 for receivers. Rivals here, if you're watching the YouTube channel, has him at 225. I think he came down a little bit in the last update. A talented football player. There's a couple of other guys. Khalil Taylor is in this of like being in the rough shape of what they're looking for from what they can do on the field, but not necessarily like Matt Campbell said. We know what we're looking for, so our receivers look like this at this position and this at this position. Some of these guys that they're recruiting, 6 foot, 6'1", 170, 165 pounds, aren't necessarily those prototypes, but they're good football players, and it would be very stupid to not recruit them, right? So there is an interesting development of being here and having access to some of these recruits and these relationships that I'm interested to see how they all fold this in to work, because the players can work in the scheme. I don't want to make too much of it, but it is a thing that they've talked about multiple times. So it is a factor when we're talking about recruiting. And some of these guys, Landon Blum is exactly what they're looking for from a size perspective. But that's a guy from a previous relationship that they had at Iowa State from Iowa, not one of these guys from Pottstown or from Pittsburgh or from Maryland, that are in the region that are top recruits that everyone's interested in.
Yes, there's no doubt about that. And it's just so interesting to get to see more and more of how this first cycle is going to play out for Penn State. We're a long ways away. Some folks are very excited about what direction Penn State's going on the recruiting trail. Some are not as excited. Others are taking a wait-and-see approach. And whatever approach you're taking, just remember, long way until the official visit season takes over in late May and throughout June. Then you'll get a wave of commitments and obviously more to come in the fall. So a lot of time to figure everything out about how Penn State football is going to recruit across the board. T. Frank's been doing a lot of film breakdowns again. We're going to get to that a little bit later in the show. Some of the players that have recently committed to Penn State and also some targets that are of interest as well. So before we go any further, we'll talk quickly about the news of the day in Penn State land. I'm sure you all have been anxiously waiting for the wrestling guy and the film X and O's football guy to talk about Penn State basketball, but we're going to do it quick. Penn State guard Kayden Mingo hit the transfer portal on Wednesday morning. Obviously a major blow for Mike Rhodes and his Penn State basketball staff. The Nittany Lions certainly I'm sure we're hoping he would stick around for a second season in state college and obviously be somebody they could build around. And Nate would be certainly much better to take the conversation and run from here. But certainly it's not a great situation for Penn State hoops right now, coming off not a great season. So we'll see how everything shakes out there. I haven't seen any list of potential landing spots for Mingo at this point in time. Obviously, I'm sure he will have a long list of suitors. But yeah, it's a shame, T. Frank, because Penn State fans, I think, were at one point hoping the Mingo brothers might unite in State College. And it turns out that by April 8th, 2 days after the portal opens, they're not going to have, barring a change of heart, either one of them for the 2026-2027 season.
Yeah, and so, like, it's important that we talked about it. It's important that you laid it out there. I don't have anything to add about basketball specifically, other than, like, just the general wide view lens of you can change your fortunes in basketball with one special player, right? You can build a plan around a great individual player in basketball, but I think that you can even see the downside of trying to do that if you're a team trying to make a splash, right? Because then if it doesn't work out, now, like, you see this drainage, the emptying of the roster right now on the basketball side of things, where maybe you're trying to build something and that's not going to be what you do this going forward. So now you got to have a new plan, and you've expended all those resources previously. Now on the flip side, Gavin McKenna for hockey, I think you'd repeat that 100 times out of 100. In football, it is much harder to say this guy changes everything for us. You know, Luke Wafel's great. Luke Wafel can't catch the ball for the offense, and he can't tackle the receiver if he doesn't get to the quarterback first, right? He can only do his one job. There are certain positions that have more of a high leverage influence on a team, but it is very much more of how do you spend your resources over the course of a lot of players, bring together a lot of individual talents that fit together well over, let's get the best example of X position and have that guy be the dominant force. Now, are there opportunities to put guys together that can do force amplification, that are, if you put two things together, then they become more than the sum of their parts? Yes. And to me, that's the most exciting and most fun thing about football, Greg, is you can have guys that aren't perfect at everything, but you get the right mix of talent and you put them in the right position, and then you get something truly unique. It's alchemy. It's chemistry. Like, how do you put these two elements together to get something third that is much more beneficial? And I think that's what makes football fun, because it is much harder, and you have to spend a lot more money to buy a championship in football. It has been, something that a lot of teams have tried to do, and nobody, I don't think, has yet succeeded with that, because even Indiana, right, bringing over players from JMU and going to the portal and being heavy with that, they were bringing in exactly the players they were looking for from a talent perspective to fit their schemes, not trying to go get the best player at every single position.
Right. And like you said, much easier done in some sports than others. You mentioned the hockey team. They're having some portal outgoing issues at the moment as well. But yeah, that's the news of the day. Penn State losing star guard Kayden Mingo to the transfer portal. We'll see how it all shakes out. You can follow along with Nate and the rest of the team at bluewhiteillustrated.com to see how Mike Rhodes does both working on building his roster moving forward, and obviously where the guys who have left end up going. So anyway, that's basketball and a little bit of hockey with T. Frank and Greg. We're on to football. This is the BWI
no
live
wrestling.
show for
What's
no
going
wrestling
on
today.
We got what? We haven't had a chance. We've been busy. We haven't had a chance to get to the wrestling show. Just like, has anyone gone to the portal yet?
No. So Penn State at this point, as we sit in week 2 of the portal, has not had any losses yet. I don't know if any are coming. I mean, looking at things just holistically, and I'll keep this brief so we can get back to football, but they don't really have a lot of needs at the moment in terms of gaining anyone from the transfer portal. Doesn't mean it won't happen, just that they don't necessarily have a gaping hole that they need to address in their lineup at this point in time. And then, if guys are going to go into the portal, they have not decided to do so yet. Doesn't mean they won't. We have until April 30th to see when or if guys go into the portal, so time will tell. But at this point, no wrestling transfers. I'm still going to be shocked, T. Frank, if there's not a couple. It would just really surprise me if at the end of this month there's not at least a couple guys looking for a new home. But we'll see. A lot of them like being at Penn State. A lot of them, despite what it appears to us on the outside, don't mind not necessarily being one of the 10 in the starting lineup. And so, time will tell on that front. But no wrestlers in the portal yet. And we'll see if that changes here moving forward.
Gotcha.
All right. Well, as T. Frank said, as we transition into the football next part of the show, don't forget to like the video. Please subscribe. Thanks for being here with us at our new time, 2 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday, April 8th. This edition of BWI Live is rolling on with a look at the players that we want to learn more about during the second half of spring practice. So Penn State put 7 drills in the books already so far during Matt Campbell's first spring in State College. They will kick off obviously 15 doesn't divide well into 2. So it's, you can call this the first half, second half, you can call after the next practice, however you want to do it. Long story short, they have already put a good chunk of work in with plenty still to do over the next couple of weeks. And so the idea here is we've heard about plenty of Penn State players so far during spring practice. Who are the guys we didn't maybe hear as much about, or the guys that we just don't know enough about? And with this roster, I went through this for some articles over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com on Tuesday. With this roster, you, at most positions anyway, T. Frank, you have your pick of the litter, so to speak, in terms of who you want to go with for this segment, because there's just a lot of unknowns, and there's many guys who maybe don't get asked about or that don't come up in a news conference or with talking to people around the program, but they're guys that could make an impact this year. So let's kick things off at quarterback. Lay of the land there, pretty obvious at this point. Rocco Becht is limited, seemingly doing more than expected at this point. Alex Mansky is out for the spring. That has led Connor Berry, the Division III transfer, to be the leader of the pack a lot of the times for the live, especially for the live portions of practice, along with the freshman Peyton Falzone and Case Evans, in addition to Jack Lambert. Who are you leading off with, T. Frank? The quarterback you're most interested in learning more about over the second half of spring ball.
So when we were talking about this is a great idea that Greg had, and I didn't want to go. Everyone has to have their own. Yeah. So you have the right answer here. You chose the right answer, but I do think there is an interesting aspect to Peyton Falzone, because is he going to stick at quarterback is a big question for him at Penn State. And again, this staff didn't recruit him. He came in with Terry Smith at the early signing period in December, and was kind of an addition who got in under the radar, maybe. Obviously, he was a name we all knew, but it was kind of a sneaky addition before the staff got there. Staff got there a couple days later, right? I know what it's like to be an unexpected addition to a crew and then having to make it work for yourself when everyone's doubting you. And it's not at all a story I'm familiar with, on my own side of things. So for Peyton Falzone, the opportunity is for him to be a Penn State quarterback right now, and to do it and to have all these situations. Doesn't have to be perfect. He doesn't have to be, a surprising, he's going to supplant Alex Mansky as the backup quarterback that we presume for the fall. Yeah. But showing he can play the position has been something he has been forcibly and demonstrably emphatic about in his recruitment, that he is a quarterback, and here wanting to play quarterback for Penn State. So, we haven't gotten to see a ton from those guys. I did see a little bit of him, but it's what you would expect from a freshman, which is you're drinking from a fire hose. And so there's going to be a lot of overwhelm on your second day of practice, which is what we got to see 2 weeks ago. So I just want to get an update of how's he settling in? Are things that I saw that I didn't like, are they getting better? Is he proving that he is a quarterback at Penn State, which everyone seems to doubt? And I'm not saying that everyone's wrong for doubting that. I'm saying it is a conversation. And so, I want to know what the follow-up is on that.
Yeah, so I went with Case Evans, but really it's both freshmen, right? Because these are two guys who came to Penn State under two kind of similar, yet obviously very different circumstances. Case Evans was committed to a couple places and ended up at Penn State with Matt Campbell and Jake Waters and Taylor Mauser. Obviously, Falzone was committed, then he wasn't. He was committed to a couple places, ends up back at Penn State with Terry Smith and co. by then obviously default with Matt Campbell and his staff. And, one of the things about these practices is it is awesome, but also challenging, is that there's a lot going on at once, as you can probably imagine. Yep. And then you guys come to the chat here on the channel, you come to the message board over on the Lions Den at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, and you ask about this guy, and you ask about that guy.
What about that guy?
There's guys I have plenty of notes on from the first time we saw this group in action. There's guys like both these quarterbacks I didn't get a good look at all. And so to me, is as much of anything else, it's just getting a feel for them, getting a feel for what you saw on their high school tape and what they look like now halfway through their first spring practice. So yeah, Connor Berry, of course, we'll get more of a feel for him, but with the situation Penn State has at quarterback, obviously we saw, and Penn State learned the hard way last year, that you're always a play away from needing the guy behind the guy. And you never know when you might need the guy behind the guy behind the guy. So definitely want to get a feel for those guys. And I think that those freshmen, obviously, to your point with Falzone, and to Evans to maybe a different degree, or however you want to put it, different set of circumstances, but have things to prove. Yeah. And certainly it'll be interesting to see what those guys look like throughout the rest of spring practice.
Yeah, I think that's and Case Evans. I want to talk about. I want to learn more about him too. I did get to see him a little bit, and I think he throws a really nice ball. Like, he's got a really, really good throwing motion.
All right, well, let's move on to running backs. Obviously, Penn State has Carson Hansen and as Sean and T. Frank talked yesterday, it is not a one-man band by any stretch of the imagination. You also have Quentin Martin returning to Penn State, coming off a big Pinstripe Bowl, and you have James Peoples, the Ohio State transfer. So who do you have on your list? I know who I led mine with, but it may just be the same one. But who do you have?
Yeah, I feel like I've banged on enough about Quentin Martin and how big is he, and is that important or is it meaningful?
Not at all.
So let's just talk about James Peoples, because I think it's an important aspect of this backfield to have 2 or 3 guys. If 1A is Carson Hansen, then 1B and 1C need to kind of be their own cluster, right? So that's how I've been thinking of it, is like you have one element here. You have Carson Hansen. We know what that is. We know who that is and how he performs. And so can you augment him with more explosiveness, more dynamism, big plays, and, plays out of the backfield so you can round out the skill set? I think Hansen can do all of those things. I think he's a good, pass blocker and everything else. But we've seen a Penn State offense that lacks dynamism in the backfield before, and it was rough. I don't think that's the case. I think even if you had just Carson Hansen, it would be serviceable. But you'd really like to have some big play guys, and James Peoples was brought in to be that guy. I think he's explosive. I'm just, there is this level of, we have seen some of the most explosive athletes in college football come through this backfield, right? Saquon Barkley, Nick Singleton. Even a guy like Miles Sanders was dynamic in his own way, the same way that Katron Allen was dynamic in his own way of creating big plays. So where is James Peoples on that scale? Is he closer to the Miles Sanders and, or is he closer to some of the ripping off wildly big runs that we've seen previously? I didn't see enough to say he is closer to Nick Singleton, again, which is just a crazy bar to have. But I'm also trying to get more information. People have their opinion, and they're already they want to be the ones early staking the claim that this is going to be the guy. I haven't formed my opinion as of yet as to what he's going to be. So that is something that I need to do based on what we see in practice and some of the reports we get.
That's why he's on my list. You just said hit the nail right on the head. A guy that you just want to learn more about, just want to figure out what exactly he's going to be for this Penn State team. We didn't get a great chance to look at it previously, and obviously that situation is still a shame to this day.
I forgot Journey Brown, one of the most dynamic players we've seen here too. Just to the point of just way too many fine points on the point of there's been a lot of explosive athletes. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. Just I saw that in the chat.
Yeah, no worries. And another thing in the chat from our same buddy Bizzle is, has Peoples embraced a potential leadership role? It feels like he'd be one of the older players in that room. I mean, to me, the leadership in that room is going to start with Carson Hansen, the oldest player in that room. He's actually the third oldest guy by eligibility standards in that room, because Cam Wallace is a redshirt junior and Peoples is a junior. Certainly we'll see how it all shakes out from that perspective. Don't have a good feel for that at the moment, but I would say I do have a good feel. I have a good sense that Carson Hansen's going to be the leader of that room. Liked what I saw from him on the field when we were out at practice a couple weeks ago, and look forward to seeing more of him tomorrow. But to me, Peoples is the ultimate curiosity in terms of what he can be. I think we have a feel, at least initially, for what Quentin Martin can be. And then obviously, we'll see how the rest of it all shakes out. We're going to get there, yeah. Argral. I see Argral in the chat wants to get to the real football players, the linemen. We're going to get there. But let's move on now to receivers. T. Frank, who you got?
So I think you should be I should be leading this and asking you because you filled this out correctly. Like if this were a test, I have no notes. You get an A plus. So Karon Brookins is the guy that I think we all know Kobe Howard, and we all saw Kobe Howard is now jacked Kobe Howard, and so there's a real positive momentum for him. Just overall, like it's a tsunami of support from Penn State fans. But I think that it's backed by some real stuff. But Karon Brookins, we talked at the top. He's their prototype of what they want to play at X. So what does he look like? How does he move? Is he fast enough to be downfield to be more than a jump ball guy? Because the great thing about guys that have great contested catch numbers is they have great contested catch numbers. But the problem underlying that is, are all of them contested catches because they don't generate separation? And Brookins is one of those guys that could be on that line. And I just didn't get a good enough look at him because, like you said, we're trying to see everything the first time we were there. How does it look, when he's running, when he's out in pass patterns? Does he look fast enough to generate separation? And so that, to me, that's the biggest question is how fast is he and how much separation does he generate with his route running?
Yeah, so he was number one on my list, but the other one I think bears mentioning is Keith Jones Jr., the Grambling State transfer. Ryan took a really nice look at him back during his commitment to Penn State. And we got a chance to talk to him in February during the transfer interview media day they had over at Beaver Stadium. And I was just curious to see how his spring would start. Haven't heard a lot, obviously, so far, but we're getting to a point where, the competitive practices have been ongoing, obviously, to say the least, but you get more and more into them as you get into this point of spring. So I'm interested to see what exactly he has in store for the second half of spring ball. Can he use his obvious speed and athleticism to make a mark on this offense? That's a guy, to keep in mind. I know you wrote about, I'm just going to throw up a link that nobody can click, but just as a reminder, you have a look at a lot of different things in terms of the receivers and the offense at spring practice intel. You can check that out over at bluewhiteillustrated.com. It's in the comments if you're watching on YouTube. If you're on the podcast version, it's going to be on the homepage over at bluewhiteillustrated.com. But yeah, I think those two obvious names at receiver for Penn State, and Brookins is just a guy that seems to come up a little bit more than you might expect. But it goes back to, was it February, I believe, Matt Campbell's second press conference at Penn State, where he called him, I can't remember the exact words, but a super player, very high praise for a guy that obviously is very young at this point. So just interested to see what he has in store here for the second half of spring ball.
Yeah, for sure. I think that, this is, Argra asked this in the chat. He said, so you guys relegated to certain practices. I've been over for one, but haven't seen you at them. So yeah, we have access to specific practices, the first Thursday and the third Thursday. So we're going to be going back tomorrow. Letterman and people that are associated with the program have an open invite to go to practice, so they can go when they like. We don't get an open invite to practice. I would love it, but that's not exactly how it works.
Well, I am going to openly invite you to talk next about the tight end. So we went different directions here. Obviously, Penn State brings in Ben Brahmer, and we'll have Andrew Rapplier back from injury for fall camp, or at least that's the expectation. But when we saw, Brahmer working out, of course, but when we were out of practice previously, and I'm sure tomorrow as well. So two other guys that are interesting on the list, and we'll actually hear from them after practice tomorrow as well. Cooper Alexander and Brian Kortovich, one an Iowa State transfer, of course, and the other a Penn State returner. They both fascinate me. With Kortovich, I just was looking at that tight end group during the last practice we were at, T. Frank. I just was... I saw him, and I didn't quite have his number memorized, but he looked, he's a big guy, and he kind of stands out. Brahmer stands out above all in the tall guy department, of course, but Kortovich is a pretty good sized guy himself. He stands 6'4", Brahmer stands 6'7". But yeah, Kortovich just caught my eye, so I want to get more of a look at him. It was towards the end of the time we were on the field, and I didn't really get to see him do a whole heck of a lot. Just one of those jot down a number for a revisit down the road. So I went with Kortovich. Why Cooper Alexander for you?
Because I want to know where they have him playing. And generally, I need to learn and figure out, crack the code of how they use their tight ends by traditional Y tight end, and then the F position, which is the H-back role, the kind of move tight end. But that's also disingenuous to say that Ben Brahmer, who might be a Y tight end, also is a move tight end. So they move everybody. But of those two positions, I would have kind of slotted Cooper Alexander to the H-back role just by size. He's 6'4", 245, I want to say. So he's more of that fullback look behind, similar to a guy like Andrew Rappleyea, who did that last year for Penn State and then turned into the team's, number one target down the stretch. I think, how he fits into the offense determines whether or not he's going to have a role during the season. And we talked about him yesterday in terms of a guy that might be doing stuff now that does translate to later, but it all depends on how you want to use these guys and how you fall in that pecking order. So is it all everyone's a Y, and then if you're number 3, then you go to the H back, or if you're number 2, do you go to the H back, or how? I need to figure that part out. That's something that's been very frustrating watching the Iowa State offense and trying to learn it, how they exactly differentiate those positions, because Alexander, from what I can understand, last year was a Y tight end, meaning line up next to the tackle who will block. And they had somebody else in that H-back role, but that guy didn't come to Penn State. So is he going to take that role going forward? And there's tons of overlap between the two. So it's not like it's going to be very clear delineations, but it's just kind of, what does the depth chart look in my head? And then how does that relate to their snaps on the field?
Right. And certainly with Taylor Mauser and the offense that he runs, there is no shying away from using the tight ends. I was reading something earlier today about the tight ends at Kansas being excited that Andy Kotelnicki was back in town, and obviously they're all pointing to his success with Tyler Warren. And with Taylor Mauser, we just know that he is a guy that will utilize his tight ends, but how exactly he'll do that with the ones he has at Penn State, guys that were already here, of course, plus the ones he brought with him, it's going to be interesting to see. And they have some, to your point, different body types, different places guys can line up. So learning more about what that looks like will absolutely be something we want to do during the second half of spring practice. Moving on to what somebody requested earlier, the offensive line. So this is a position group led by Ryan Clant. It's not fully healthy this spring. Most aren't. I feel like that's something we might as well just rip the Band-Aid off and talk about quick. There's a lot of teams dealing with injuries this spring. Yeah. I've gotten a sense that Penn State fans feel like Penn State is dealing with maybe more than others, but just reading some stuff around the Big Ten and around the rest of the college football landscape, there are some teams going through things. And I think part of it, and not that it really applies necessarily to the players, most of them anyway, that are on the Penn State roster now, because Penn State was done in December and Iowa State didn't play in a bowl game. But I think that there is something to be said about just how long the seasons are now, and also the medical plan that will get you ready for the season the fastest. And I think sometimes, maybe now more than ever, it means giving up summer off spring practice, and that not necessarily being a bad thing. And so, things get cleaned up, guys get things taken care of maybe they wouldn't have before, and I think that probably has as much to do with this as anything, T. Frank.
Yeah, and it's the decision of the timeline of when to do it too, of going through winter workouts, getting all of that lifting in, and then missing the football part. I've been a big proponent of, if you miss January and February, you miss a huge opportunity to get your body right from a physical perspective, that you just there is a progression to lifting that takes time that you can't really microwave when you come back late. Now, these are elite athletes that have amazing growth potential and have put in a lot of work already. So a lot of these guys don't need to, but if Anthony Donko misses 2 straight off seasons of lifting, that isn't good. That is not a good thing for an athlete to miss. And you will eventually get enough lifting in. And I don't want to make it too big of a deal. It's always kind of trying to find that sweet spot of, this is a deal, but it's not going to be the end of their career. And to me, that is part of the decision-making process where, okay, you can mentally be involved in spring. You can't mentally be involved in lifting. That doesn't do anything for you. You physically need to participate. So, yeah, with the offensive line, not having Anthony Donko out there gives us an opportunity to look at some of those other tackles. And I know you've got Malachi Goodman here. So we got to see him a little bit. Why are you keying in on Goodman?
Yeah, you mentioned Donko. I just saw, so Malachi Goodman was the first number I wrote down on my sheet of wow, or, off the bus guys. I don't know how exactly to put it, but just guys that caught my eye that made me take a second look. And we know that he was, of course, a freshman last year at Penn State, knew that he came highly regarded as a recruit, but he just looks fantastic. I mean, he looks like an offensive tackle at this point. And the one thing we didn't get to see a ton of, though, is it's one thing, as we all know, to look like an offensive tackle, and it's another to put all the things together on the field that make you a successful offensive tackle. So I just want to see more of where he's at from that side of things and how it matches with the way he looks. Because the way he looks, I mean, if you were picking teams without knowing that part, the football, the on-field part of it, he'd be one of your first picks. But where's he at from a technique and knowing the offense and all that kind of a standpoint? Because this is a team that at some point, you guys were talking about it, you and Sean yesterday. You never know when you're going to need this guy or that guy, or when somebody is your first string right tackle that has to go to a different spot, whatever it might be. And there's obviously Anthony Donko is going to be a tackle on this team. There's no questions about that, but there are questions about the tackle depth chart in general. And Goodman, at least to me, looks like a guy who can answer some of those. But it's not going to be just because of what he looks like and how strong he is and all that. It's going to be what he does, obviously, on the field during the second half of spring practice and then on the road to summer camp as well. So he was the one that caught my eye, and I just think that I was going down that list. There's a lot of names you can pick from, like we said earlier at the start of the show. There's plenty of options for players that could intrigue you or that you want to learn more about. I think for whatever reason, I feel like I know a little bit more about Owen Alicini and Garrett Sexton than I do Goodman. And so certainly for all those reasons, he topped my list.
Yeah, and I'm not going to disagree. I think that those other guys are still talented too. And that's why where I'm interested in is the interior of the offensive line, because where do you go for depth? I was a little more encouraged than I thought I'd be by some of the young guys when I saw them practicing. And again, they're practicing on bags, but they just moved better than I was expecting. And the guy I'll bring up here again is just Vaya Ikakula. Whereas you're going to need somebody on the interior to be a depth piece behind Trevor Burr and Cooper Cousins. So is it Goodman? Because that's what we've floated that a couple of times, and I think that's a realistic thing for that to happen for him, especially if you feel like you can get what you need out of those other guys and you don't want to play the redshirt freshman tackle as a starter. Maybe that's reasonable, right? I think that's you still want to play your best players where they're best, and then they think he's a tackle. So if you can get away with not stealing depth from the offensive perimeter, a guy like Vaya Ikakula, who they like a lot and has had to work to get his body into the shape it needs to play, I think he's a guy that I have my eye on as, again, a redshirt freshman. We're not talking about a lot of guys that have a lot of experience under their belt, but they do have talent. And is that somebody who can contribute in some way? And they need to find some of those guys on the interior, or else they're going to have to look to a guy like Will Tompkins to be a guy who could play interior or on the outside, or a Goodman if you wanted to do that.
Right. And so that is maybe the most interesting thing overall about this offensive line as we move into the second half of spring practice is just how the depth chart is going to shake out once they get 15 practices in the books and you're able to do an initial set of where, who, what, where, when, and why. Obviously, at center, it's Brock Riker and it's Dom Rowley, and I think that's pretty obvious and set. Anthony Donko almost certainly is going to lead one of the tackle spots, but beyond that, I think there's plenty up for grabs. And it's not just the first team reps, it's the ones behind the first team as well. And so that offensive line, there's plenty of talent there, but it is also a situation where Penn State has, and Ryan Clanton, the position coach, has plenty to figure out, and they'll figure out some of it during these first 15 practices. But like Matt Campbell said back in late March, they certainly won't be deciding all winners and losers. I have a hard time. He said, we won't decide any winners and losers. Then I have a hard time believing that won't be the case. But for the most part, Ryan Barker is going to be your kicker. Rocco Beck's going to be your quarterback, right? So some of those things will get decided. But the offensive line is absolutely a spot where there are some question marks without a doubt.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know. The center position, that's we talked about this yesterday. The center position, we didn't get to see Dom Ruley, but we know kind of what Dom Ruley is. And I got a good view of the offensive line last week. So, there's a lot of known quantities, honestly, on the offensive line, but there's a lot of unknown of where they're going to land. And that's going to be like the biggest thing you just outlined going forward. By the way, I love that in the chat we've had a good 10. Since we talked about running backs and I made my point about Saquon Barkley, it has been a running, let's name some dudes from Penn State history at running back. We've got everyone mentioned. I think everyone is. I don't know. Did Capoletti make it into the chat? Like, it's just been straight up. Everyone's naming their favorite running back in the chat. It's been when I've been distracted and you ask me a question and I'm hesitating. It's because I'm reading the chat, going through all the names. It's been amazing. Even Silas Red came up.
Yes, I don't think Capoletti has been mentioned. I think he's the one. Oh no, I'm sorry. Nittany Eagle Brad had him at about 10 minutes
Wally
ago. So, okay. Yes. So in general, you guys are just be on a mission now. You're going to get every Penn State running back that's ever played. I'll need a couple more bingo boards at this point. So I'm glad the chat is enjoying itself. If you have any questions for us, feel free to interject with those as well. Let's move over to the defensive line, T. Frank. You have a group there that is. I wrote about it in Tuesday Takes yesterday at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, but one of the groups I have more questions about, and it's not because the players can't do the job that we'll be asking them, and not that they can't do it at a high level. Just a lot of guys you don't know a lot about, and there's a lot of projection tied up in that position group. Yvan Kemajou leads the way there. We saw some really exciting things from him last season, and there's an obvious reason why they wanted him back as part of this first Matt Campbell team at Penn State in 2026. But there's also a lot of guys, and he's one of them, you don't know what their full ceiling is. You might have an idea, and you don't really know what their floor is either. So what do you just make overall this defensive end group as we sit here at the halfway point of spring?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of things, and this is where my ADHD is going to get me because I'm going to try to get at this from every single position at the same time. First thing is, they were on the other side of the practice facility from us last week, so we couldn't see a whole lot from that group anyway. Secondarily, they've been bringing position groups out to us to talk to after practice, and we have not gotten a lot of the defense. We got a lot of the secondary. We've not gotten, we haven't gotten a lot of the front seven. So we haven't gotten the linebackers, the DNs, the D tackles. We haven't got to talk, at least I haven't had a chance to talk to those players at all. So getting to ask them questions, getting to ask the position coaches questions has been what we've been waiting for this second half. So yeah, I have the most questions about this front. And then on the third level of this is the scheme itself and what to expect from them. Because the offense, we have a template of what the offense is going to look like based on what they brought over. That's pretty clear. And I've been talking about this nonstop since February of we don't fully know what they're trying to do up front because Dantling's done so many things. And I'll say I think I got a lot of stuff wrong by just looking at the old film and saying they're going to do this. I don't think that's definitely the case from what we saw from practice, from what the little bit we did get to see. And I was focusing on the secondary. So there's just so many questions. And I guess the guy that I'm interested in is that hasn't gotten enough talk so far is Ike Ezeogu, because I think he's going to be a starter, and he's going to be a guy that is important to the overall scheme, but I don't know how. 275 pounds now, dropped weight. Can he rush off the edge and be a productive pass rusher? I know he can do it technically, but is he going to be able to generate pressure? Is he going to be I know he's going to be a reliable run defender, but is he going to be like a playmaker off the edge? Because, we can talk about the young guys, and they keep bringing up Kemajou. You brought him up. I think that's absolutely right. But kind of like Carson Hansen, the steady Eddie of the group, the guy that I think they're going to rely on for a lot of snaps.
Yeah.
We haven't really talked about him, and I haven't got a chance to see him do work in camp. We also didn't get to see any live periods, any good on good last time. So, I don't know if we get to see that. That'd be interesting to see how he does and how they do along the defensive line. So, to me, that's why when you brought this topic up, it was the entire D-line I was thinking of, but it was him specifically that I was thinking of dudes I need to learn more about because they're going to be in a radically different position than they played last year.
Yeah, and speaking of that, the defensive tackle room is very similar. So Penn State lists 1, 2, 3. I'm not going to count on air, but let's just say I would say 80% of the guys they list as defensive tackles, that may be slightly high, but come from a new school, come from a different school to Penn State. And unlike all but one of them, they're not from Iowa State. So you have Alijah Carnell listed here as your pick for defensive tackle.
Yeah,
a position you could have went any direction with. Why is he the one that stands out to you?
For the same reason. He's going to be changing his role and changing his body type, or at least developing his body type, where he was a hybrid edge before. He was playing in a similar but different role to Ezeogu. Now he's going to be playing full-time defensive tackle. He looks like a full-time defensive tackle, and his athleticism, his size, his movement skills are all really exciting. But just like we said, with that group, I didn't get to see him a whole lot last time, so I think I'm going to spend a lot more time looking at the defensive front if we can, and I'm hoping that they're outside for 1,000 reasons, but one of them is that like we can get a little bit closer to the D line when they're outside.
Yes. Fingers crossed on that. Looks like it's going to be a nice weather day in State College on Thursday. It's a pretty nice weather day today, or at least it looks like it out the window. So we'll see about that. Linebacker, I went with Cam Smith, and merely because I didn't get he was a guy that was obviously talked about a lot during his recruiting days. Played one snap last year at UCLA. I believe that was when Dom DeLuca got hurt, or someone got hurt and came off for a play. I'm pretty sure it was DeLuca, yeah. And that was his only snap of the season. And so he's a guy that certainly is on the roster anyway, the lightest linebacker they list on the roster from a weight perspective. So wouldn't mind getting a better feel for where he's at in his progression. But I think the one you went with is the one worth spending more time on, Cael Brezina. Why did you roll with him for your pick?
So first off, dude is jacked. We have a photo of him that I keep trying to use for one of our thumbnails. He's got like just giant biceps. So it's one of those intimidation factors for a linebacker. But I think he's the guy that is not the obvious starter at any of these positions, but can play all three. So he is Dom DeLuca plus in my mind in a certain way. And I don't mean that in a derogatory sense towards DeLuca or certainly towards Brezina. I want to be nice to everybody. But I think Brezina did play three different linebacker positions for Iowa State last year. And if you're looking for a guy, one of the two is going to be starting at will linebacker, either Tony Rojas or Caleb Bacon. You're going to have most likely Cooper Ebel is the starting Mike linebacker from last year. So where does that leave Brezina? It leaves him to be the backup Mike and to float between wherever they need him. And I think that's a very valuable role to have for a guy that has the athleticism and the size for there not to be a drop-off. So he's basically a fourth starter that we haven't really talked a whole lot about because we've been talking about the other guys so much, even with Tony not being available for spring football.
Brad in the chat says, I hope the Bills draft Dom DeLuca so he's still in T. Frank's life. I don't think Dom is going to be drafted, but if he signs as an undrafted free agent, T. Frank,
there you go.
Podcast
totally
is all
into
yours.
Totally into it.
Let's move on to the secondary, the last line of the defense, the last line of discussion in this segment of today's BWI Live show. The quarterback room is one that we mentioned when we were talking about the quarterback situation, a room you feel like you have a pretty good read on, and especially at the top of that room. And so in this part of the conversation, I don't think it's helpful to say you want to see more of Aldavian Collins or more of Zion Tracy or even Darius Dixon. I mean, you could, but I think we know what his potential is at this point. So that's why I went with the red shirt guys, Xavier Thomas and Josh Johnson, two guys that haven't heard a ton about during the start to their Penn State careers. So just where are they at? What's an update with them? Where are they progressing? Maybe where are they not progressing? We'll have to wait and see. But those were the two guys that jumped off the page for me. And again, a position where, unlike some of these other ones, there's not, for this, at least for the way we're framing this conversation, not a whole lot of other names to pick.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And this is something we talked about on yesterday's show is Jahmir Joseph ready to be cornerback 3? Because there's not a clear cornerback 3 from a participation standpoint last year. He was the guy that played, but it's an open competition. And they've been talking about Zion can play corner, nickel, or safety. And so, like, are they actually thinking maybe we need to have him as the third corner just in case? Especially once you get Jamison, Patton, or Jeremiah Cooper back. I get those two confused. They're very different football players, but their names are synonyms in my head for some reason. If once they get some of those other players back at safety, like, do they want to use Zion as a third corner, or is it one of these young guys? Are they going to take it?
Yes, and so that is an interesting battle. It's one of those ones that's down the depth chart and maybe is not one that, I mean, it's not totally super far down the depth chart, but still, it's one that is not, you're not talking starters there in all likelihood. That is one that maybe not everyone's going to want to talk about at any point, but certainly will have an impact on this team, whether it's special teams or whether it's somebody that finds a role as a situational guy or what have you. So certainly an interesting one to watch. Take us home, T. Frank. Your safety pick is who?
Yeah, I'm going to go with yours and just say Jamison Patton as well. Because of what I just said, is how does he fit into this? I think that Zion Tracy is a starter and is going to see time at safety, right? So he's starting nickel and then he's going to move. So like nickel, then safety. And then you have Marcus Neal, who is going to be safety and maybe sometimes linebacker, like pseudo linebacker. Where does Patton fit into all of this? Is he just fitting where the other guys aren't?
Yeah.
And again, when Jeremiah Cooper comes back, like how does that work into this as well? Because they brought in all of these guys from Iowa State, and I know Cooper was brought in late, but I think that they need more coverage skill on the back end because neither of these guys that are looking like linebackers at safety necessarily have the skill sets of pure cover players.
Right.
And Patton especially looks like a linebacker. So, like, how do they fit together? And Patton, to me, is the one where I don't have a clear perspective of what is his role within the defense with those other two guys being hybrids in mind.
I also think it's interesting to point out that there's obviously plenty of experimentation going on with this Penn State staff, especially on the defensive side with Danton Lynn being new as a defense coordinator back at his alma mater, that there's plenty of experimentation going on. When asked about moving LeVar Arrington from linebacker to defensive end, one of the things Matt Campbell said was that he's always going to move guys trying to find out, I'm paraphrasing here, but what is the best place that they can help Penn State the fastest, right? Everybody wants to play. Everybody wants to do it and help the team in a way that helps everyone win. So if they think guys could have a chance somewhere, they'll move them. And that's not obviously unique to this coaching staff. Plenty of them do it. But to your point, I think there is probably maybe a little bit more than normal trying to figure out the parts that go together here, especially when you talk about the Iowa State guys who played in a different system than what they're going to play in this year. And where do they fit that maybe could be possibly different than where they were a year ago.
Yeah, it's going to be very different. It's not a 3-safety defense, so it's going to be very different. And they've got to learn and adapt into what they're doing.
All right. Well, that was a focus on the current team. Let's move into some recruiting talk, T. Frank. You've been doing a lot of film study of late. Obviously, commitments have been ongoing for this Penn State class of 2027. There's some guys who have been visiting campus. There have been players who are, trending in the right direction for Penn State. You can check all that out over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. 50% off now. An annual subscription during our spring sale. Where do you want to start the bidding here?
Well, let's talk about Peter Bourque. He's visiting today, and part of this is because there's going to be so much news on the recruiting show, and we're going to have so much stuff going on this weekend with looking at the actual roster that I wanted to get some of these thoughts out here about the recruits because I don't want to get in the way of when we actually get to the information that fans want to know. Not that I think it's getting in the way, but just there's too many things to get to.
Sure.
And, Peter Bourque, I was watching some more of his stuff, specifically some of his full game footage, not just the highlights, to get a sense of what kind of quarterback he is. And I'm impressed. It's not hard to do that when, my kind of threshold for high school quarterbacks isn't necessarily very high. So some of the things that I've seen of Peter Bourque that I really like, I think he's very decisive with the football. He runs an up-tempo spread offense. So a lot of that is by nature in the offense, that there are going to be a lot of quick decisions, a lot of quick game. But it's not like it's a dink and dunk offense. And I like the way that he can read the defense pre-snap. So I get a sense that he's got a really good football mind from his film because he is making those decisive decisions with the football and not putting the football in danger. Now, everyone makes mistakes. Everyone throws interceptions. But on the whole, he takes care of the football. He's more than willing to run. So if there's a read on a quick read that isn't there and he's got pressure, he just, okay, I'm going to pull the ball down. There's not that, oh, no, what do I do? He knows, okay, that's not open. Now I scramble, and now I'm running. And I really like what he brings to the field from the mental aspect. And to me, we've talked a lot about this with quarterbacks, the size, the arm strength, they're all important to how high can you push your skills when you have the mental ability to do so. And he's got the mental ability to do so. I think he fits this offense really well. I was watching a game right before we were coming on air. And again, like I said, they're in this up-tempo system that is simple, but also has, I would say concepts I've seen at the college level, and it puts a lot on him, right? So he's throwing the ball a lot, and on an opening drive, dink, 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 and then suddenly he hits a post for a touchdown against Quarters that looks like something Andy Kotelnicki drew up. And so all those things to me fit together. If I understand Will Menzel might be the number one quarterback, and I don't want to get into the comparison because I haven't seen Will Menzel, but Peter Bourque is really good. He's going to be a really good quarterback. So I've just been really impressed. And I think if Penn State lands him, he is right on par with the recruits they've been getting. on par with Troy Hune, Ethan Gronkmeyer, guys that went to the Elite 11 finals or guys that were high-quality prospects in their senior seasons. It might be better than those players, and there's certain things he has to work on. I think his footwork has to get better. He has to be more consistent with the lower half of his body. But from the neck up, very impressed. He's what they're looking for sure.
When it comes to receiver Landon Blum, a new Penn State commit, of course, and a guy that plays 8-man football in Iowa. I'm not sure if you ever scouted 8-man football. It might have been new for you, might not have been new, but I know that you were very intrigued by what you saw. So what stood out about him?
Yeah, so this is one thing that's in my article over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com today that I just I want to emphasize here. I've been talking to some people, and this is a reoccurring theme about Penn State football recruiting. They want guys that make plays. Yes, it's important that you have size and athleticism. And we get into this binary conversation and internet debate of blah, 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 blah about they only want gritty players versus talented 4-stars. And it's not the point. The point is they want guys that can do it at this level physically and mentally. They're looking for guys that make plays and are good at football on the high school level. So Landon Blum, watching some full game footage, we did a full watch along over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com on the message board where I posted videos that I found on YouTube of his semifinal and then championship game in 8-man football, which by the way is really fun. That was a fun watch. 8-man football feels like something you could play with your friends. It feels very accessible to the regular person. But within that game, you're still playing football, you're still playing for something. There's a championship on the line. And in those games, Landon Blum took over. In the semifinal game, he had a bunch of big explosive plays. And in the championship game, he put them up early with 2 30-plus yard touchdowns on an 80-yard field, by the way. So it's basically, I don't know what the percentages are, but it's a massive percentage of the field where he just goes up and gets it. Then in the fourth quarter, he has a critical catch late in the game to put them into the red zone where they then get the go-ahead score, but their defense gives up the game-winning play with under 10 seconds left. So he won them the game essentially, and then they lost the game. So that's when we talk about they want guys that make plays in the big moments, high leverage plays. That's what Landon Blum does. That's what he did on film. So he is absolutely one of their guys. And then just the evaluation, we talked about it here. It's an ongoing conversation because we don't have updated numbers about his speed. The numbers we were talking about were from his sophomore track season. So what does he run now? Does he run closer to a 10.4 or a 10.3? I think he's a receiver. I know we've had this conversation about, is he an H-back? Is he a guy that's closer to a tight end at 210? As long as he doesn't blow up and he's 235. And as long as his speed improves as one expects it to when you get into a full college lifting program, I don't think there's any question he's a receiver. And he's very much in that Karon Brookins category of jump ball magnet, guy who can sky up and get the ball. He's got amazing hands. So I know that some people might be rolling their eyes or they might be saying, yeah, it's a white receiver from Iowa. This dude can play. And I think he's a receiver for Penn State going forward.
All right, short on time here, but we got 2 more guys to get to. Give me your high-level thoughts on Blake Betton, and then also a target for Penn State at this point in time. I hope I get his name right. Jonathan Galette, is that pronounced correctly?
I think so. And it's good because that's the ones I've done less on. Blake Betton's coming this weekend. I don't think guys we're not talking about enough. That's the theme of this show. He's very athletic. He's a safety in Minnesota that is going to play linebacker, 6'4", big dude, can run. And I just think that generally we need to talk about him a little bit more because I think we talk about linebacker at Penn State. He's going to be a Mike for them that can run and cover. And he's not great in coverage from what I've seen so far, but he doesn't get a lot of opportunities to make plays on the ball. And I need to do more work there. So I want to say I still am learning more about Blake Betton in that area. And then Jonathan Galette is a fun player because he's 5'11" and plays box safety. He's a physical, hard-hitting, 170-pound tank that can play either safety position. So you get him if he decides to commit to Penn State, and then you get another guy. The other guy can play whatever they want. There's a lot of flexibility with Jonathan Galette and his skill set because he's athletic, he can run, but he also hits. So again, guys that make plays, guys that have high football IQs and are around the football regularly. That's what they're recruiting in Jonathan Galette.
All right, there's T. Frank's thoughts on one guy who's committed to Penn State, Landon Blum, and then three others, Peter Bourque, Blake Betton, and Jonathan Galette, who are targets for the Nittany Lions as they continue to try and fill out the class of 2027. All right, wrapping up with best bets for this week, and I bet you can guess what the theme is. Let's see. All right, it's best bets times, and if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code ON3, and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code ON3. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets. If your bet loses, just make sure you use bonus code ON3, ON3, when you sign up. That's capital O, capital N, the number 3 on 3. When you sign up, and if you are a member of BetMGM or if you're signing up, BetMGM players will receive a Masters Odds Boost token. To use the token, add any Masters wagers to your bet slip and activate the token. If you win your bet that was made with the Odds Boost token, you will receive extra winnings in unrestricted bonus dollars. So check them out over at BetMGM. Obviously, the Masters are here. It is a big week in golf. We could call this the Nate Bauer segment if we wanted to. We started the show kind of with a Nate Bauer segment.
This is a great show for Greg, or for
we're
for
going to
Nate
end it
not to
with
be here.
golf. Yes, the Masters starting on Thursday down in Augusta. Two bets for me on the BetMGM app. I'm going with John Rahm to win at plus 1,000, and I don't love that short of odds in this tournament. I really don't, but I kept circling back to him. So he is the top pick for me in terms of the win bet, but I'm going to take a little bit of Cam Young to win this tournament as well, and also going to bet him to finish inside of the top 5. I think he's ready to have a big tournament and a one where he may not end up on top, but he's plus 333 at the moment to finish in the top 5. So I'm going to take him to do that. There's a lot of cool props on there, a lot of things you can look at, from options to bet on the number of hole-in-ones possibly in the tournament, to the winning score to par, to a whole bunch of other things. The winner without Scotty Scheffler, for example, if you think he's going to run away with this tournament but want to wager on who finishes second, you can certainly do that. There's a whole menu. I'm assuming based on what state you're in, it may change a little bit. I'm looking at the Pennsylvania one, of course, but check them out over at BetMGM. Their Masters list of options of things to bet on is perfectly suitable for anyone that's looking for some way to enjoy the Masters otherwise this week. So that's best bets from BetMGM.
See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona, 1-800-327-5050 in Massachusetts, 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa, and 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. First bet offer now for new customers only. Subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are not withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days. In partnership with Kansas Crossings Casino and Hotel.
All right, T. Frank, it has been the Wednesday, April 8th edition of BWI Live. A big day on tap Thursday if you're listening to this later Wednesday, or if you're listening to it Thursday morning. Regardless, you're going to want to check out BlueWhiteIllustrated.com Thursday morning. A lot going on. Penn State practice, spring practice number 8. Nittany Lions will be on the field. Afterward, we're going to hear from Matt Campbell. You'll be able to watch his thoughts right here on the BWI YouTube channel, either late Wednesday or Thursday morning or early Thursday afternoon. Just depends on his schedule and when we get to talk to him. There's some players speaking afterwards as well. So a lot of content coming to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com here on the YouTube channel. Obviously, the recruiting intel continues to flow. There's a lot going on in the Penn State universe as spring practice rolls on, and we will have it all covered at Blue White Illustrated. Any final thoughts, Steve Frank?
Nope, just pray for me. 2 videos within 2 hours, including a live show. It's one of those. It's one of those moments.
As long as your brain doesn't break like it did a couple weeks ago, where you were trying to compute the algorithm and how the live show might be impacting the Campbell video, might be impacting the recruiting commitment video. I felt bad for you.
Let's just not have 6 videos in one day. Let's just keep it to 2, a live and an upload. If they get a commitment tomorrow and we're in the middle of all of that, I might just like get in my car and drive into the sunset.
The nice thing is, if it happens to you, Frank, you just hit the breaking news button, and the live show just turns into the breaking news video. So you always have that
that's a good
option as
point.
an out. Yes, your
That's a
goal
fair
is to have it.
point.
Your goal is to have one of them happen, if it's going to happen, all at the same time. That's the best thing that can happen. For you. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickle. Check us out over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. The guys are back talking recruiting and practice tomorrow. And until then, we will talk to you next time.